Welcome to Forum 360. Thank you for joining us on our global outlook with a local view. This is Leslie Unger, your host today. Over the years, when professional athletes or professionals have guested on this show, I have gotten different answers to the same question. Did you always know what you wanted to be? Some athletes knew since they were children, and others didn't know until late in their college career that they could be professional athletes. What about being a rabbi, a spiritual leader? Is that a calling since childhood or a decision made as an adult? Recently, Akron got a new rabbi. This rabbi took a circular route, you might say, both to Akron and the clergy. Join us today as we learn about Rabbi Matt Marko's journey, Judaism, and Northeast Ohio from a newcomer's point of view. So welcome to the show and to Northeast Ohio.
Thank you, Leslie. Nice to be here.
Now, rather than chronological order, I'm going to start at the end and work back.
Fair enough.
Okay, so let's start with the summer of 2025. Why did you choose to come to Akron and the Beth congregation?
Well, I had just come off a year sabbatical. I felt like I needed some time for myself to recharge my batteries, to reevaluate where I wanted to go. I had led two congregations through a whole series of crises. And I was just at the point where, you know, when the pilot says when the oxygen mask comes down, you have to put on yours first before you can help anyone else. I was starting to feel like if I kept going, I would not be as effective in my job as my job deserves. So I took off a year, I did some traveling, and then when I went back into the search process, I was just looking around. It's through the Rabbinical Assembly, there's people that are asking, and I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to commit for a 5-year or a 10-year, so I was looking more like dating before marrying, and Bethel came to the search process a little bit late because unfortunately the previous rabbi's wife became seriously ill, and they were looking for an interim. I was looking for an interim, but with the opening that, hey, if we love each other, you know, all things are possible. So I came and I visited. I really, really enjoyed the congregation. It's very Hamish, it's very warm and welcoming. The board is very committed and very functional, which is not always the case in Jewish institutions. So I was very, very happy to be here, and I'm enjoying myself so far.
So let me ask you, when you first read it, the opening first, or heard about it, and you see Akron, Ohio, what is someone's first thoughts that aren't familiar with Akron, Ohio?
Where? that was where? And then, okay, look at the map. Okay, well, it's close to Cleveland. And I'm generally a city boy. I was raised in New York, and I've lived in Southern California. But I also spent 6 years of my career in a town reasonably equivalent in size to Akron in the South. And there's something delightful about Jewish community in a smaller town. What I've found is if you're the Jews that are in New York or LA or Chicago or even Cleveland, it's easy to do Jewish. So you don't necessarily have to. It's just kind of in your kishkas. And when you
know, you're gonna need to come with a dictionary for non-Jewish listeners.
It's in your guts. You just feel it. You just feel it. Whereas in a small town, if you want to be Jewish, you have to do Jewish things. And so I find that the level of commitment and the buy-in and the show-up factor is so much higher, and it's very, very enjoyable. I like to be with these type of people.
So take us back to the first time. Did you fly or drive to Akron the first time you came? You flew. Okay. So you're coming down 77 or something, and you're coming towards Akron. Can you remember at all your first thoughts about Northeast Ohio?
Well, when I came to interview, unfortunately, there was some travel issues, and I came in very, very late, and I was supposed to be picked up by some folks, and I felt terrible that it was going to be very, very late at night, and I kept saying, well, please let me take an Uber, please. And they were having none of it. They no, we're going to pick you up. So when I came in, it was really dark, and I didn't see a whole lot, and I got dropped at my hotel.
Okay.
Sorry I didn't have a more colorful answer for you.
That's right. Okay, well, that's just travel today, right?
But like I said, it was me saying I'm going to take an Uber. That was a real I'm going to take an Uber, whereas when my mother, when may she rest in peace, when she would say, come to visit me, don't pick me up at the airport, it's okay, I'll take a cab. No. That is Jewish mother for you better pick me up and I will be, yes, of course.
So, of course, we can't know for sure, but can you perhaps guess that perhaps in other cities or perhaps in big cities, if the same thing happened and you said, I'll just take an Uber, might they have just said, great, take an Uber?
How do I say this without speaking Lashon Hara, which
a
is
dictionary?
From now on, I'm going to translate.
Okay.
Lashon Hara is gossip, evil speech. I did interview with another congregation in a larger metropolitan area, and they did arrange my flights, but didn't say a word about how I was going to get to the airport to the city. And it was just completely on my own, which seemed very, very strange to me. And then at the end of my interview weekend, they were just like, okay, thank you.
See ya.
And it was my job to get myself back to the airport, which had a lot to say about, do I really want to work with these people? That's not very hospitable. And, in Judaism, the value of hachnasat orachim, of welcoming guests, is a very, very high value. And fail.
So perhaps, again, something we might take for granted here, but is not everywhere.
Yes, definitely, for sure, absolutely. And also the kavod harav, which the respect for, not necessarily me, but the respect for the position is very different here than in congregations that I've served in larger communities, where I don't feel that same respect for the institution of rabbi, if not necessarily me. I have to earn.
Yes.
But the position itself, there's a greater respect, I think, in smaller communities.
Well, talking about position, for listeners that may not know, what distinguishes a conservative synagogue, which you are a rabbi at a conservative synagogue, can you explain what distinguishes a conservative synagogue from a Reform or an Orthodox synagogue?
Great question. First of all, I think the name conservative has to be changed. I've been saying this for years and years and years because it gives a political connotation, and that's not what it has to do with at all. It was originally chosen as in conserving tradition. We conserve tradition where we can, and we rethink our position where we must based on changing times. I would say when you look at the three movements of Reform, Orthodox, and Conservative, Conservative falls somewhere in between. Reform has made a decision a long time ago that halakha, Jewish law, the mitzvot, the commandments, are not binding. They're more folkways. And the Orthodox say, well, these are the immutable laws and nothing changes. Well, as a conservative Jew, I believe that the law does matter and that I am committed and bound by the mitzvot, by the laws, and bound by the Torah. But I'm also equally bound to interpret. So you might look at it in terms of how the Supreme Court operates. A Ruth Bader Ginsburg compared to a Scalia, a legal positivist.
Interprets differently.
Exactly. What was the intent of the framers as opposed to what did it mean in that place and time? So while we do follow halakha, a lot of times we will say, well, okay, we live in the modern world. How can I get there and still remain authentically within the rubric of halakha? And so a lot of the things that we've done is, the big one is egalitarianism. There is equality of genders. Women can lead any part of service, can hold all the same positions. We sit together, whereas in an Orthodox community that would not be the case. Women are ordained as rabbis. We openly welcome LGBTQ plus folks. And the overriding principle there is B'Tselem Elohim. We're all in the image and likeness of God, and all human beings are deserving of dignity and respect and welcome.
Now, were you raised conservative?
I was raised a high holiday Reform Jew.
Okay.
So I was in a very, very, very secular home. We were culturally Jewish.
Yes.
If someone asked me
Which
what I was.
much easier in, was it Brooklyn? Did you grow up in?
Well, Brooklyn until I was in elementary school.
Okay.
Then we moved about an hour north of the city.
It's so easier to do in the East to be cultural.
Very Jewish, yeah.
So then, where along your journey did you go to the conservative interpretation?
Okay, so growing up, I went to a Reform congregation, and we pretty much just went high holidays once or twice a year. But I did go to Hebrew school because that's what you.
I have to interrupt you. Does this mean that if I would have asked one of your Sunday school teachers, who in this class is going to become a rabbi?
No, I was probably the boy most likely to be kicked out of class and sent to the rabbi's office.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a wise guy. I didn't want to be there. I hated it. I thought, why am I here? My friends go to school and I have to go to another school. Why do I have to go to a second school? And I think part of it was, I don't know, nothing. It was never explained to me the why. This is what we do, and there was never a why attached to it. So I really try to give the why, not only with children, but with adults too. Like, why even bother? We live in a free society where I can go to the movies, I can go play golf, I can go to a concert. Why would I choose to go to a church or a mosque or a synagogue?
Would you say that is something that's changed? Because as an executive coach, I have a saying that the magic is in the why. If we know why, we can duplicate something. If we don't know why, maybe we'll give a great speech once, but it won't happen again. Has that something that has changed, not just with you, but would you say in the Jewish religion, of less of a this is how it is and more of explaining the why? Or is it just
I think we're getting there. I think you make a great point, but we have a long way to go. I think there's still, there is a bridge between the traditionalists, and God bless them, love the one you're with, the ones that are sustaining it, and this is the way we do it, and this is the way my grandfather did it, and this is the way we do it. And the younger generation, who is far more institutionally averse, they are more about radio station WIIFM, what's in it for me? There are 140 character generations. So yes, we have to provide a why, because otherwise, why bother? What are we offering? And the old questions were, well, how do we get these people in? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what do these people want? What are they looking for? And then, how can we provide that in a meaningful, robust, and vibrant Jewish package?
So if you were the most likely, say, to get kicked out, what might you or a teacher have said back in elementary school or high school that you would become?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I guess I was always out there. I've always been very gregarious, and I was involved in theater, so they probably would have thought I would have given it a shot, which I did. But I did just, and if it's okay if I digress, I did find one of my Hebrew school teachers, Mrs. McKibble. I don't know if she's still with us.
Good Jewish name.
Well,
Mrs.
yeah,
McKibble.
Mrs. McKibble from
Okay.
Mikubal, as in
Okay.
Kabbalah. And I was probably the worst to her. And I did find her on Facebook about, 8 or 9 years ago. And I was able to get to her, and I was able to get her phone number, and I called her. And I apologized to her for being such, and I said, any rotten kid that I get, I deserve every bit of it and then some. And she was very, very sweet, and she was very delighted to hear that I had become a rabbi.
I bet. Today we are talking with a new person in Northeast Ohio, a rabbi at Beth congregation in Akron, Rabbi Matt Marko. So you kind of mentioned you went towards theater. Right. I actually have a former client that just moved to Hollywood in the spring to try to make it before his 30th birthday, to try to make it.
Well, good. There's an actor shortage out there, so he's got one right at the right time.
There is. Young, good-looking men, right?
Yeah.
But so you went into acting. What were your aspirations when you went into acting?
I didn't, I've never been the kind of person who, I've always been more process-oriented than goal-oriented. So I don't know what my aspirations were, other than I really enjoyed doing theater. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to major in, I just really enjoyed it. And my father begged me, please take a couple of business classes, and I didn't. And he also begged me, please take the LSATs while your mind is still fresh. And I said, I'm not going to be a lawyer. He says, you never know. I said, I know. Did I know if I was going to make it as an? I don't know, but I know I enjoyed it, and I know my college years, undergrad, were just delightful and joy. And then when I got out, I wound up working I became a company member of a professional theater, and I was also on staff, so I was able to be in a very artistic environment and feel like I was part of something very special. Ultimately, I went back to New York to give it, the full go, with some success, and then that's what eventually led me to Los Angeles, because like your cousin, you said, or your client, I heard of the actor shortage in Los Angeles as well.
Yes.
And when I got there, I found out it was a lie, that there was no shortage whatsoever. So.
Now, before we get to some philosophical questions, I have to ask you on behalf of my dad, may he rest in peace. You were a master cabinet maker. My dad was really good with his hands, and everyone always teased me, are you sure he's Jewish? So where did your interest in woodworking come from, and what did you think you were going to do with that?
Well, so I jokingly say I am the world's second Jewish carpenter to become a rabbi. I started doing woodworking.
And for the audience that needs the dictionary, you're referring to?
Yeshu ben Yossi.
Thank you.
Was that good enough?
Okay.
Jesus. It's a joke. Who knows if he actually was a carpenter? There's definitely a historical disagreement on that. But no, when I was in undergrad in theater school, although my major was performance, you had to have a well-rounded education, and part of it was a degree of set construction and costuming, and also people were needed. We needed bodies to create sets. I also found out that I got along with the techs a lot more than I got along with the actors, because a lot of the actors were more full of themselves than they had any right to be. Yes.
Really?
Yes, they were. And I liked hanging out, working with the tools. At some point, a bunch of tools, somebody dropped a bunch of tools in my garage in Los Angeles because he bought a boat, and he was working on the boat to eventually sail around the world. And so I just started playing with the tools. I said, do you know what you're doing? I'm like, well, I know reasonably, I know how to be safe. And I started making stuff for myself, and then friends started saying, well, where'd you get that? I made it. So I started making things for other people, and it became my actor survival job. You always have to do something
better
to pay
than
the
waiting
bills.
Tables, right?
Exactly, when you're auditioning. So I started making things, and ultimately it grew. Again, I've never been so goal oriented. I'm in the moment. I invest in the process. I enjoyed what I was doing. It started growing, and next thing I knew, I didn't have enough space in my garage, so I said, oh, well, okay, let me rent some commercial space. And the tools that I had were, decent, but not professional level tools. So I invested in professional level tools, and, then I had a full staff, and I worked with several contractors.
You and Harrison Ford.
Yes, exactly. And William H. Macy, he's a Turner, though.
Okay.
So
let me ask you, before we go into some maybe more difficult questions, how much of your acting background do you use in giving a sermon?
I don't think I'm acting. I don't think, and even I think fine acting is not acting. It's just being. It's listening and it's reacting. So simply being trained in that manner, I know the basics of how to produce my voice properly. I don't have to think about it. I know how to breathe. I know how to keep my eyes up. I know how to keep my weight on both feet. I had an acting professor right in the middle of the scene. He's like, keep your weight on both feet. So I think I know how to communicate, and I'm comfortable looking people in the eyes. I've also learned a lot of tricks along the way in terms of when you're auditioning and you're working from a script sometimes that you've never seen before. You walk into a casting studio, they hand you a page of sides. Sides is the script they give you, and you learn tricks like how to keep your thumb along the line. That way you don't have to look at the paper, and when you look back, you know exactly where you are. You're not fumbling. So I write out most of what I do. I don't generally read it because I know it well enough, but it's still maybe my crutch that I like to write out. But it's also good because then I have them. I have them for all posterity. Not that sometimes I'll go and I'll look. Well, what did I write last year? You thought that was good? All right. Well, the heck with that drivel. I'm going to start from scratch. So I just think and also not only sermons. I think it makes me effective at my job because I'm approachable. And I'm not afraid to speak. I've always been outgoing. Even as a little boy, my mom said she could take me to a restaurant at 2, 3 years old, and they would be nervous because, oh my God, here's this little kid. And she said, no, he'd get up and he'd walk around. I would introduce myself to people. I'd go up to different tables. So that's something that I do every time at a synagogue function. If we're having kiddush, which is lunch after our service, I make sure that I eat very quickly, and then I can spend time with each and every table, and I try to get just a little bit of face time with everybody there, so they know I care and I'm listening, and they also get used to me and know, oh, he's just a regular guy. If I need him, I can call him.
Now, I wrote my master's thesis on 2 speeches given by Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver after World War II. Rabbis used to be an unbridled social conscience. I probably could say clergy in general used to be more active in social issues. What would you say is the rhetorical role of a rabbi today in a world that is so divided, which means that your congregation is going to be a reflection of that division?
I don't think it's my place to speak politics direct politics from the pulpit, but it is absolutely 100% my place to speak ethics from the pulpit. And quite often, ethical considerations are going to overlap with politics. So what I do is I'm very careful, and I don't avoid it. I'm not afraid of it. I will bring it right out there, but I will bring it forth from a point of Jewish tradition and Jewish literature and the rabbinic mindset. And then let people decide what the best way to go about it. I'm not smart enough to figure out what the right answer is, but I'm good enough to present what the problems are and what I think Jewish ethics calls for. So here's an example. I guess it was about 6 or 7 years ago when the border crisis really started to come in the public consciousness. And at that time, in our Torah reading cycle, we came across this concept of the cities of refuge. And in the Torah, prescribes that the Israelites are supposed to set up several cities of refuge. And ostensibly, it's if someone, a manslayer, someone who accidentally kills someone without malice, can flee to one of these cities and then be protected. And that would protect against the cycle of violence and blood feuds and things like that still happen in many places in the world. Well, the rabbis, when they find things in the Torah that they don't like, they really, really narrow the scope of how they read it legally. But when they find things they do like, they read it very broadly. So when that happened, I brought forth some midrash. Midrash are rabbinic embellishments and stories about what a city of refuge means. And it goes through of all the things it must have, and you have to clearly mark so people can get there. And the biggest innovation they had was it's not just fleeing from the blood avenger. The final bit of this particular bit that I taught said, anyone fleeing Malach HaMavet, which is the angel of death. Okay, so now when I gave that teaching, it certainly made some people uncomfortable. And they came to me and said, they were not so happy. And I said, I didn't say a word about anything after 2,000 years ago. I didn't say a word about a politician. I didn't say a word about the border. I did not say a word about immigration. So if you're uncomfortable, there's a reason you're uncomfortable, and you need to examine in yourself what makes you uncomfortable about that. And you talked about rabbis being social commentators. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says that it's the job of the rabbi to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So sometimes people need to be pushed out of their comfort zone, and if they're feeling uncomfortable about something, there's a reason. Give it some thought. Again, I don't know what the answer is, but I know you should be thinking about it.
In just the couple minutes we have left, I'm going to ask you
Did
for
I
just
go long?
1 or 2 word answers. No, we're just nearing the end. I'm going to ask you for 1 or 2 word answers. How do you compliment a rabbi?
It really depends. I don't do so well with compliments, and maybe it's part of my training of this. You become you're this religious exemplar, and people think you're somehow closer to God or have more answers. I don't. I know a little more Hebrew. That's about it. And what happens is people say, "Oh, Rabbi, you're so wonderful. You're so wonderful." And I've seen many colleagues who start to think, "Well, gee, maybe I am so wonderful." you're done. You are no good to
So
anybody.
don't compliment a rabbi, I guess is the
you
point.
you can say thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate, or what you said was really meaningful to me.
Okay.
I'm really glad you're here. Or you could just say Shabbat Shalom.
Okay.
Good to see you.
What gives you hope in 2 or 3 words?
I have to have hope. It's not something that gives me hope. I have hope. I have to have hope, because without hope, there's nothing. A dear friend of mine, and I know it's more than a couple words, but I have to say this, Louis Sneh was a survivor of the Shoah. He was taken from his home in Mezőkovácsa, Hungary, towards the end of the war, and by the time the Hungarians were taken, the Nazi war machine was very well oiled, and the survival rate was very short. And he lost his father on a death march, he lost his mother and brother, he was the only survivor, and you would think this man would be bereft of hope, and he used to say to me, Metju, do you know what a Jew does when he runs out of hope? He invents a new hope. So for Louis, I try to invent new hope.
Okay. He has been referred to as a 3rd career rabbi. What might be your 2nd or 3rd career? Whatever your profession, geographic location, or stage in life, chances are there will be detours along the way. Rabbi Marko shared his detours and some multiple careers along the way. Perhaps we have learned something today that will help all of us on our journey. At Forum 360, we offer our audience a global outlook with a local view. I'm Leslie Unger. Thank you for joining us today.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.